Good afternoon, everybody. Around the country and literally all over the world. We are excited to welcome to our weekly celebration on climate justice and environmental justice. Coming live here from the store, across the globe, Rainier Avenue Radio World, your community radio station where your voice, your story, your power matters. Today, we kick off something bigger than a broadcast, something deeper than a conversation. We are launching Earth Deserves More Than a Day, a week-long summit in partnership with King County Parks that centers community, culture, and climate justice. Now, let's be real. Earth doesn't just need our love and attention one day out of the year. Earth deserves more than a day because the communities most impacted by environmental degradation are often Black, brown, and low income, and they are living this reality 365 days a year. From the air we breathe to the water we drink to the green spaces we need, it's all connected. Now, what better way to start this off than by simply addressing the question, what is environmental justice? Obviously, this is a political hot button. So it's going to be impossible to take the politics out of it. As a matter of fact, we welcome the politics being engaged. We just ask you to be open-minded and thoughtful and listen to what's being said. You may hear some things that you agree with. You may hear some things that you disagree with. The whole point of having these conversations that we're going to be having are to get more information out there to you, our public, so that you can make informed decisions. This is the What is Environmental Justice panel. I'm going to quickly introduce our guests, and then I'm going to turn the conversation over to them. I will start at my far left with Sylvia Hadnot. Sylvia, how are you? You want to pick up that microphone?
I'm doing well today, Tony. How are you?
I'm fantastic.
Good.
Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate, what you do. And I'm going to give you some time to talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
Also, Jonathan Chin. Jonathan, thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a real privilege to be here.
All right. Awesome to have you. Again, I'm going to give you the opportunity to say a little bit about what you do and what your take on environmental justice is. And Sarah Shores. Sarah, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Again, you know the deal by now. I'm going to provide you with an opportunity as well to kind of talk about yourself. Rather than me read your bio, I'm going to have you share whatever you think is relevant and important about the work that you do. So we're going to start with that, Sylvia, and I'm going to start with you. If you want to share us your professional background, maybe even what inspired you to get into this work, we'll start with that.
All right. Thanks, Tony. Yes. Hello, everybody. For me, I am a community member first and foremost. So I know you just asked about my professional background, and I'll start there. As a little girl, my family was at times food insecure. And one of the things that I did come to depend on actually was my dad building gardens where we lived when we had yards. And from the time I was little, realizing that food doesn't just come from the grocery store, but it can literally just come from whatever land you find yourself on, that changed everything for me. And over the years, I got into environmental studies. I now teach in the environmental education department at Western Washington University. And I'm also the co-president emeritus of E3 Washington, which is an environmental organization that spans the entirety of Washington state and works to support environmental educators. In my free time, I don't know, it's not free time, it's my chosen time, I guess. I don't have any free time. I work on contracts to write curriculum in environmental education to make environmental education more accessible to all kids and adults, really, throughout Washington and beyond, hopefully global, as Tony mentioned earlier.
All right, we're going to get more into that. And Jonathan, please, the same for you. Just a little bit about your professional background. If there's something else about your story that you would like to share, we have time. That's why this panel is a little bit longer.
Thanks, Tony. I love what Sylvia said because it really resonated with me. I moved to Seattle in 2008. And when I moved here, I started working in Seattle's Chinatown International District. There is a community garden there called the Danny Wu Community Garden. And I spent 4 years working in that community. And it was really, really frustrating to see the disinvestment of resources, policy to help that that low-income community of immigrants. You could see if you go further north, if you go further east, you can see the difference in what those communities look like. You could see where the resources were allocated in those areas and really was not dedicated in the international district. And no matter what I did to provide those residents, those gardeners, really my family members there, with what they needed to grow the food to sustain themselves, to grow culturally relevant food, to provide not only their food security, but also their food sovereignty. A lot of the foods that they grew were things you couldn't find in grocery stores because they came from the countries where they also came from. I started to understand after so many years working in that community that no matter what tools I gave them, no matter how many resources I gave them, tangible resources I gave them, they were still stuck in this cycle of poverty, still stuck in the cycle of food insecurity. And I wanted to dedicate my frustration to solutions. And so I started understanding that really a big lever of change, of influence, comes from policy. And so I made a leap from working in urban agriculture to working in climate justice policy. And that's what I do right now. I'm the climate justice policy advisor for what is known as the Environmental Justice Council, which is a governor-appointed council to ensure that the governor's office, the legislature, and different state agencies under what is known as the Healthy Environment for All Act, that they all are living up to their own dedication, their own commitment to environmental justice.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And Sarah, same deal, just a little bit about your professional background. If there's a story you want to tell, we got time.
Thank you. Well, I know I'm going to ask for gardening questions right now. Yeah, those are great experience on this whole table. Yeah, my background. Well, actually, I'm a arborist. I work for University of Washington, and I got my start being a wildland firefighter when I lived in Oregon. We went all over Canada, fighting forest fires everywhere. There was an actual fire season at that time, where nowadays fire season is all year long. So that's how I got my start into trees and urban forestry. I wanted to be a forester and work for the Forest Service, but after multiple years living in the woods all summer long, I decided I want to be more in an urban environment. So now I work at University of Washington. I'm dedicated to caring for the trees, keeping them in our landscape as long as possible, and if they have to be cut down, using them to their highest value. So that's my background, and I speak for the trees.
Okay, here we go. And this is, again, an open dialogue. You can jump in whenever you want to. You can respond to what someone else has just mentioned, or whatever that works and however that works. To start us off, and this is to the entire panel, how do you personally define environmental justice? And I say that personally because, again, this is such a big topic. It means different things to different people. And one of the things that I want to do is have you be personally involved in this conversation, because this impacts people in a number of different ways, which I'm sure we'll get into. And I won't pick someone unless no one grabs the microphone. But if anyone would just like to grab the microphone and tell our audience what environmental justice means to you personally. Okay, Sylvia, I'm gonna start with you.
All right, that's fine with me, Tony. Thank you. Yes, so for me, environmental justice, it definitely is a hot button issue, and I think I have a hot take on a hot button issue. So for me, there's really no separation between ecosystems and human systems. I have always really been very confused by the separation of supposed nature and human, that nature is over there in city parks, in state parks, and that human is over here where the big tall buildings are. What about the spaces in between? The spaces where people have homes and gardens and yards? What about me, who was eating off the land in my backyard when I was a child in urban spaces? I think it creates this false divide, and that same mindset that creates this kind of a false divide is the same mindset that led anyways to environmental destruction, and that ends up devaluing people as well. So not only is this divide different between environmental justice and human systems and human justice, but the same mindsets that create a lack of justice in the environment as well as a lack of justice among people, they come from the same place. And to restore one, I really believe that we must restore both, and that they're intricately intertwined.
You know what, Sarah? I'm going to go to you because you mentioned fighting fires, and climate change is increasing the intensity and the frequency of wildfires, and it's hitting tribal communities and rural areas hardest, and making summer air quality across the state dangerous, and especially for our youth and elders. Now, I don't know if that's what you want to say, what environmental justice means to you or not, or I certainly don't want to steal your thunder, but I know that you have more to say. So the same question for you personally: what does environmental justice mean?
Yeah, I think environmental justice is that everyone should have the same opportunities to reap the benefits of a clean environment. So the air quality, clean water, reap the benefits, or at least not be harmed by the environment. And yeah, a plug for the trees. I feel like trees can help clean the water, can help clean the air, can make communities safer and more aesthetic and nicer places to be. Yeah, and I think the one thing that's took a while for me to wrap my head around is equal is not equity. So communities have different needs, have different resources, have different opportunities. So using environmental justice in a way that helps those communities, no matter what their resources are, or if they need more resources, you give that community more resources.
Yeah. Is that it? That it? You good? Yep. All right. Jonathan, same question for you, speaking to a broad audience that you may impact some folks directly with your statement. You may impact some folks a little more broadly with your statement. For those who are listening and go, what is this environmental justice stuff all about? From your perspective personally, what is environmental justice?
When I think of environmental justice, I think of my popo. I think of my grandmother, who came to this country as a refugee, escaping the wars that were happening in China, between China and Japan. She came to this country without any knowledge of English, any familiarity with this culture. And I cannot imagine what it would be like to leave what you're familiar with your young family, coming to a country and trying to make it, and then being housed in the projects in Chinatown in San Francisco, with just difficulty making sure that your children would be fed, making sure that your children and you would be safe, that the world that she would like would be so different if she was able to have a voice in what she wanted her safe environment to look like. And not only that she would have the voice, but that her voice would matter, that there would be things that would change because of that voice. I think that the root of environmental justice is making sure that all communities, no matter your language background, no matter your economic status, your racial background, that you have a voice in what your environment looks like, that you have a voice in what kind of, what is in your backyard, what kind of food you can eat, what kind of food that you want, what kind of air you want to breathe. That a lot of the communities that are suffering are because they're disadvantaged, because they don't have the resources to advocate for themselves. And when they don't have the resources to advocate for themselves, our capitalistic society takes advantage of that. We, as a society, produce a lot of goods and materials, and the product of those goods and materials are things that we don't want in our backyards. But the individuals and the groups of people that have the privilege of wealth, of power, of resources, we can avoid the consequences of capitalism. But the communities that don't have money, that don't have a voice, they don't have as much power. And so they are left with smog, they're left with contaminated water, they're left with areas where they cannot feel protected from the increasing harms of climate change. And so if we advocate for their voices, if they have a say in what is going on, that I feel is the start of environmental justice.
Okay, anybody want to add on to that? Or if not, I'll go on and I'll just ask another question. Everybody good? Anybody have any comments that they want to?
I can share a comment.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Jonathan, I really appreciated what you shared, and you too, Sarah, too. And it caused me to think about also the future. And for me, environmental justice is also all about the future. And bringing in capitalism, I think, is very interesting, and the differences between different socioeconomic statuses and privileges. Something I think about when it comes to systems thinking and why these two systems are so intricately intertwined is that even the wealth of capitalism can only protect you from environmental degradation for so long. Like, I think about here in my hometown of Seattle, there have been flight paths that were rerouted to go over Beacon Hill and to avoid the more wealthier neighborhoods of Medina and the island, Mercer Island. And when I was young and we lived in Beacon Hill, my mom had terrible asthma. And then one day, eventually we moved away and went to Shoreline, and that's where I went to high school. And her asthma just disappeared. And when I was younger, I didn't really understand what was going on. But then when I started to study the different impacts of policy on different neighborhoods, and how certain neighborhoods that are more low economic status neighborhoods have some more of those impacts, it got me to thinking. And then I saw that eventually, because of all of us, we breathe air that touches each other. We work with water systems that touch each other. Like, the water systems don't know what a border is. The air doesn't know what a border is. And so eventually these impacts will come for the more wealthier neighborhoods as well. And so it makes this environmental justice issue, while it is something that's been impacting me for my entire lived experience, it's going to continue to impact more and more of us in the human family and the more than human family as the years go on as well.
And anybody can chime in. I'm just going to ask a different question. If you want to comment on something that's been said before, feel free. Jonathan, I'm going to address this question to you, and I'm going to ask everybody essentially the same question. How is environmental justice different from broader environmentalism? And maybe it's not in your thoughts or your opinion. But do you see a difference? Is there a difference in environmental justice and broader environmentalism?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think I'm not a historian, and I'm not well versed in the history of environmentalism in this country, but from what I understand, just as an analogy, a lot of environmentalism focused on the preservation of natural spaces in the mindset of Western colonialism, where there was this ideal image of what the natural landscape should look like, which removed the key element of indigenous populations were part of that landscape. So they just removed those indigenous populations, and then they just wanted to maintain nature for what it was, the streams, the way they looked, and the trees for what they were. But what they did not think about was who can access those spaces, and which of those areas that were preserved, which one of those were preserved, because there are natural spaces in low-income communities of color, but I do not feel like they were invested in as much as natural spaces closer to wealthier populations. And so the difference between environmentalism, or one very simple distinction between environmentalism and environmental justice, is that environmentalism takes humans and the diversity of humans out of the picture, whereas environmental justice integrates the complexities of our racist, capitalistic society and tries to see how do we deconstruct the shackles of racism and the structures of capitalism and make sure that everyone has access to these spaces, no matter where they're coming from.
And Sarah, I'm gonna go to you on, but first till I get an arborist, is that?
Yes.
What does that mean? What does that mean you do? What is that?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. So anything that has to do with the trees, I have a hand in. So if there's a construction project, I make sure if there's going to be a tree that's preserved, that we don't damage the roots or hurt that tree in any way. It's disease management. It's deciding which trees, once they become too hazardous, which trees need to come out. Coordinating contracts. Disease control. We have a whole inventory. So anything that touches the trees, I have a hand in.
Okay, so same question for you. How is environmental justice different from broader environmentalism?
Yeah, I think you nailed it with the access portion. I think if we have our environmental laws, but there's a certain community that can't benefit from those environmental laws or in general environmentalism, you're doing a disservice to that community. And environmental justice is everyone has the opportunity to access those resources of clean air and clean water. I think of your capitalism comment. I had the opportunity to travel to Senegal a few years ago, and they have entire communities that are fishing communities. Their whole livelihood is on fishing. They have the big, beautiful boats. And we went to this beach, and you could see out in the distance a BP oil rig. And they had sold their fishing rights to BP. And all I can think is, in America, we're probably using that oil, and then that community they can't fish their natural fishing waters, so there's a lot of people that just can't work anymore, and then they can't sustain themselves, and they can't can't make their livelihood, and then as a result, we're benefiting from just passing on the environmental justice, the negative part of environmental justice, to a different country. So we're benefiting and they are not benefiting. And if globally, if there was environmental justice, we wouldn't be doing that to other communities. Yeah.
Sylvia, you mentioned earlier that the air pays no attention to our borders. The water doesn't care about what we call state lines or whatever. And I'm going to ask this same question of you. And we're just going to keep digging deep into this, but there's some things that I want to kind of set the table for a foundation. How is environmental justice different from broader environmentalism?
Yeah, thank you, Tony. I really appreciate this question. I think I'm probably the youngest person at this table, which is okay. And also, environmentalism precedes me by a couple of decades. Whereas environmental justice, I think, is something that was probably born within my lifetime. So there's this long, long history, at least from my perspective, it's a long history. I know for some of you in the audience, maybe you're like, that was yesterday. But for me, there's this long history of environmentalism that, like both of you were saying, really centers conservation, and it centers preservation. And much of that conservation and preservation is for the purpose of human consumption of natural spaces, or just kind of at least stopping the damage that we've done where it's at. And in my opinion, and I think this is pretty scientific also, there's also this like reversal of much of the damage that's been done that needs to happen in order for the world to be a safe and healthy and culturally thriving place for all of its living inhabitants, whether these are our human relatives, our more than human relatives, so the animals, our elemental relatives, you know, the oxygen, the hydrogen, etc. And I think of this word that was coined, I think in the 90s, or maybe it was the early 2000s, of intersectional by Kimberly Crenshaw. And she was talking about feminism, but it was her way of saying that, yes, we need feminism, and we also need to think intersectionally about it. Because for some women, it's not just misogyny that affects them, it's also misogynoir, or misogyny plus racism. For some people in the world, it's not just that their air isn't clean, it's also, like Sarah was mentioning, that their entire community, their entire cultural way of living has been attacked by this degradation of environmental respect. So there's this intersectionalism piece that I think gets added on when we think of environmental justice versus environmentalism as a broad concept.
Okay, anybody, any further comments or? Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
I'm thinking of the effects of a poor environment, and if you have less resources, less access to healthcare, it's going to affect you exponentially. It's not just, you know, a community that has all the resources at their will. They can handle sickness a little bit easier because they have those resources. So it's not just that you're making somebody sick, it's that you're making them sick and they don't have the resources to get better as quickly as possible.
So you can see, you said this was happening in Senegal. So just again, that point from Skyway to Senegal, from the Duwamish Valley here to the Dominican Republic, we're talking about a global issue. And so from each of you, why do you think it's important to center, because that's kind of what I'm hearing here, class, race, and equity in environmental work? Why do you, and maybe you don't think it's important, why do you think it is important to center race? Race is always something that comes up that people go, oh, not this again, you know. Class, and this term that we use now called equity, which you said equity necessarily isn't equality. Why do you think it's important to center race, class, and equity in environmental work? Sylvia, I'll start with you.
Yes. So,
if it is important.
Yeah, well, I mean, in case it isn't obvious, I do think it is important. So I'll just claim that. And
I just say that because not everybody feels that way.
Sure. And I know equity has become a hot button word. And so for me, for the purpose of this conversation, I define equity as all people having access to what they need to thrive. So being able to push past simple survival and into thriving. So you have your cultural resources, your food resources, your health resources, etc. So if equity means anything other than that in your mind, I would ask that while you're listening to me, maybe allow that definition to be what it is for you too. And so for me, environmental justice also isn't necessarily about giving people their worth back, but it's about removing the barriers that keep them from being able to access healthy environments, but also something that's already inside of them. One of the things that happens to people that are being marginalized from resources, especially marginalized from educational access, which if you look at the statistics, it's mostly young boys of color, as well as people of any gender of low class, so low socioeconomic status, who are the most marginalized from educational access. And I wonder how the world would be different if the genius and the intelligence of those people, instead of being bottled up and shoved off to the side, had been invested in and expanded over the last several hundred, but specifically really the last 40 or 50 years. There is so much innovative capacity in young people too. I'll add youth to your list of race, class, and equity. I think that youth are an incredibly important group of people to center in this work. There's an incredible amount of innovation that is just waiting to be unlocked with the right support and the right access to resources. The world could be a completely different place in like 10 years if resources were invested in people like people of color, people of low socioeconomic status, and young people who have been forced to survive and forced to come up with all of these interesting, incredible ways that they've made life work for them. Imagine if they could apply all of that intelligence to some of the world's biggest issues now, and thinking about how the only reason that they can't is because their education is underfunded. So again, I bring back to this little spiral that environmental justice really is a social justice issue for me. And centering these people, I think, is one of the best ways to be able to move past walking in the circles that we've been walking in for the past 40 or 50 years, banging our head against the same brick wall that we've been banging our head against, and coming up with some new ideas that can actually take us into the future.
Interestingly enough, I think it was last Tuesday, and again, it's kind of hard to take the politics out of this. The current federal administration and President Trump issued executive orders essentially rolling back some of the laws and initiatives that the Biden administration had put in place. Well, there are people who say that's good for some folks. We also know that some of the things that that can happen when we don't pay close attention to how we regulate these things are cancer and a bunch of other stuff that happens to people as they're impacted and affected. Jonathan, I'm gonna ask you that same question, but I'd like you to explain to us what the HEAL Act is, if you don't mind sharing a little information about HEAL.
Yeah, I'll take the first question and I'll talk about HEAL.
You want to take the question first?
Yeah, I'm going to answer why.
Okay, yeah, and then knock yourself out. You want me to repeat it, or you got it?
No, I got it.
Okay, you got it. Yeah, you look like you were chomping at the bit. That's why I said, okay, let me go to Jonathan. Centering race, class, equity, and Sylvia said youth as well, but centering race, class, and equity in environmental work. Why? Or should you even? Why is it important?
Yeah, I was really trying to think, and I implore the audience to really think with me too, of what in history has ever been done that was great, that was only done by one person. Even the most brilliant minds, even the most generous people relied on somebody else, someone else, to do whatever they needed to do to accomplish in this world. I really liked what Sylvia had said earlier about it's hard, I think this is what she was saying, please correct me if I'm wrong, that she really struggled to identify the distinction or the difference between an ecosystem and a human system. And that made me really think about an ecosystem is the sum is greater than each individual part. If you go into a forest, or if you go into shorelands or the ocean, a prairie, there are different species out there, a grass, a lichen, a mole. They're the big things that we notice, that we really, I think as humans, we really gravitate towards those really big animals like grizzly bears or big trees, the sequoias, or big fauna and flora that really catch our attention. And oftentimes we kind of ignore the smaller elements in an ecosystem. But all of those elements of the ecosystem depend on each other. That the bear would, or the grizzlies would not be able to exist without the lichen. I'm not an ecologist, but I know that there's a connection between the lichen that's growing on the trees and that bear that's roaming the forest. That you can't have one without the other. And I feel like in our society, we overlook, or we don't think about everyone as part of this ecosystem that we all inhabit. That I cannot get as far in my life with my family without the other person who's unfortunately doesn't have a house and has to live on the street. That we are all in this together, and if we help each other, then we all move forward. And so the voices of the most marginalized communities, they have brilliance that we don't recognize all the time, because we don't give them a space or a time to advocate for that brilliance. But I guarantee you, if you go into those spaces and you have the patience or the humility to just listen to what people have to say from their different lived experience, you will come out of on that other side a more informed human being. And that is critical in this work for environmental justice, which is really the importance of what I had mentioned earlier, the Healthy Environment for All Act, which was this transformative legislation passed in Washington State in 2021 that integrated this idea of environmental justice into the government, where the governor's office, the state legislature, and state agencies, 7 state agencies, agriculture, commerce, ecology, health, Department of Health, natural resources, Puget Sound partnerships, and transportation, that those agencies, in addition to the governor's office and the legislature, are integrating what we've been talking about here today into their work, so that their strategic plans of what agencies do, what their goals are, integrates environmental justice. How they do their work, how they engage with communities, which communities they engage with, and how they do it. Sylvia and I were just talking before this panel about how important it is for our materials to be translated into other languages, because yes, English is the predominant language, but it's not the only language in this state, in this country. And it's so key to get other people to come into the conversation. In order to do that, we have to make sure we use the languages that they're most comfortable using. And then the distribution of the benefits, like what Sarah was saying earlier, a lot of the investments that we put into the environment historically have not considered the human impacts of those investments. And so there's a goal of 40% of environmental investments to benefit overburdened communities or lessen the environmental burdens on those communities. And one element of the HEAL Act is the creation of what is known as the Environmental Justice Council, which is a governor-appointed council made up of 16 council members. The majority of them are leaders in overburdened communities. There are 4 tribal representatives, leaders in their own tribal nations. There's a youth representative, a labor representative, a business representative, a couple of environmental justice practitioners, and an at-large seat. And their role is to amplify the voices that have been historically unheard in this state, to amplify the voices of tribes and overburdened communities, making sure that the policies that impact their lives, that they have a say in those policies.
Thank you. And Sarah, same question to you. I don't know, maybe it makes a difference, or it does make a difference when trees are being planted, and areas that you are engaged and involved in. If so, what is that? Should we be centering race, class, and equity in the job that you do?
Yeah, I think we definitely should be. I think we should in every area. I'm just the university, but I know City of Seattle has made an effort to get more trees in the low-income neighborhoods and underserved populations. I'm so happy that you're in policy and you're in education. So I think that's the future of making these huge changes. And yeah, we're all, like you were saying, we're all interconnected. The bears, the trees have the fungus that goes all over different species. Even they share resources. They know that the community is better if there's diversity in species. So it used to be the common thought was the trees are competing for everything, the way the humans are competing for all the resources. But anymore, they found through research that the trees are actually helping each other. When there's a tree suffering, they will provide more resources through the fungus, through the ground to those trees. So I think we could take a lesson from those and help each other out, because we're all connected. The unhoused population, it's very unfortunate for the unhoused population, but it affects everybody in the long run. So helping everybody out is the key to everything. And I think of the keystone species, like when the starfish start to go away, you know that something is very wrong. And I think to myself, what's the keystone species for humans? And I'm thinking the climate is probably the keystone species, because, the hurricanes are more, and I think I saw somewhere recently that the hurricane warnings used to also be in other languages, and they've taken that part away too. So if or maybe tornado warning. So if you're getting a tornado warning, you can't read English, then you're putting yourself in danger too, or they're putting you in danger. Yeah.
Wow. We're going to go to break here. But like I said, from Skyway to Senegal, from the Duwamish to the Dominican Republic, these are issues that we're broadcasting in the interest of the Puget Sound in Washington State. But I knew there would be people listening from all over the place, and thank y'all for doing this. And whether you're representing your community or the state, anybody who's interested is going to want to know what's going on here, because there just isn't a lot of conversation about these things. So somebody's actually listening in Louisiana. Have you heard of a place called Cancer Alley?
Yeah.
Yes, you've heard of it. Cancer Alley, where we suffer from toxic air and water due to petrochemical plants, and it primarily impacts Black residents. I wasn't going to ask you to cut, but if you know about it and you want to, that's a real thing. Anybody want to share anything that you might know about? If not, I just mentioned it, so that's cool. But
I can share briefly.
Can't talk.
So it's colloquially
Cancer Alley.
Yes, it's colloquially known as Cancer Alley. And this is an environmental justice Superfund site. Superfund, it sounds like it should be a good thing. Like if I got super funds for my business, I would be super excited, right? But no, Superfund's bad. And Cancer Alley is located in Louisiana, as my sharecropper grandfather would call it. He was from New Orleans, as he would call it. And this is an area that was intentionally poisoned. When I don't remember exactly what the project was that was going to go in, but when they were doing research on this project, I don't remember if it was oil or some other kind of natural resource extraction, or perhaps a factory that was going to be working with some poisonous chemicals. They did their research about where they would like to locate it, and they chose this site because the people who were living there were poor and people of color, mostly Black. So this is, I think, Tony, actually a perfect circle around to why is environmental justice, why is it so important to include race, class, in my opinion, youth, and equity? And it's because so much of the history of environmental injustice doesn't just accidentally impact these people. Much of it impacts them on purpose, because there has been narratives that some people's lives matter less than other people's lives. And to bring back what Jonathan was saying, that's actually untrue. When you think about a systems thinking perspective of the world, everybody's life matters the same amount as everybody else's life. And my life is less well when other people's lives are less well. And this narrative that I think Americans, I mean, not all Americans, but that is part of American history, that some people matter less than other people, it really has to be addressed if we're going to address environmental issues with any fidelity and with any true impact.
Jonathan, you're shaking your head. Did you want to comment on this, or we'll go to break? I don't want to cut you off if you had something you wanted to say about this Cancer Alley. That's what they. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Sylvia, for just speaking with so much wisdom. Yeah, the Cancer Alley was one of the, I think maybe one of the starting points for the environmental justice movement. But I want to bring it back here to this Duwamish area, because we have an area here called the Duwamish River Valley.
Yeah.
And that area, if you picture it right now, the way I picture it, all I see are shipping ports, huge plumes of smoke from industrial factories. There are communities that live there that are breathing in these toxic fumes that have contaminated waterways. I believe the Duwamish River is also a Superfund site. And we have these areas where, like Sylvia was saying, there was an intentional decision to place the most toxic production sites in areas where the voices would be the least powerful, the voices that we most devalued. And environmental justice is trying to flip that model on its head so that we can amplify those voices, making sure that they are heard, and that we stop this cycle of environmental injustice.
We're going to be back, and actually we're going to drill down on that a little bit more. We actually have a Duwamish River tour that's taking place tomorrow that folks have signed up for. I'm happy and unhappy to say that it's sold out, which means it was for free, so there wasn't a fee attached to it. But so many people were interested in taking this tour that we filled it to capacity, which means that there are other people who are interested in finding more about this information as well. So it's me, Tony B. I am your facilitator for this particular discussion. What is environmental justice? All week long, right here from the Columbia City Theater, we'll be hosting live panels. We've got Youth Night on Thursday night. That's going to be a lot of fun and probably very informative. And to your point, we'll hear from those folks who you say should also be centered along with race and equity and class in this conversation. Art of Soul Gallery. Now, we've got a really cool gallery here of some phenomenal art that folks have created that, from an artist's interpretation, they feel represents climate justice and environmental justice. It's all free. You can come down here to the Columbia City Theater and check it out. Oh, and on Friday, we will have elected officials here. We'll have a few more, but the City of Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell will be here. City of Bremerton Mayor Greg Wheeler will be here. The Seattle City Council President Sarah Nelson will be here, and there's a couple other invited folks from Yakima and Spokane, and I'm curious how they interact. And again, with this thing of the environmental justice issue, not understanding borders and what there is among our elected officials, that brings this all together. And maybe there's not, I don't know, but we'll find out a little bit more. And then on Friday night is our closing ceremony. We'll have performances and a lot of cool things going on. Just everything all this week. Make sure and tune in. Come back and we'll finish up this conversation. My guests again, Sylvia Hadnot, Jonathan Chen, and Sarah Shores will be back with me right after this.
This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not explaining to my intern exactly what R&B is, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
The Washington State Nonprofit Conference is the largest gathering of nonprofit professionals in the state. Visit nonprofitwa.org to learn more about this powerful gathering of leaders, employees, board members, and nonprofit supporters. You can join May 13th and May 14th in person, or May 16th in Spokane, or May 20th in Tacoma. With 30 workshops, 4 keynote sessions, and 4 distinct learning tracks, the Washington State Nonprofit Conference is an incredible opportunity to connect with experts and discover resources and strategies to drive positive change in your organization. Ready for action? Register today at nonprofitwa.org.
What's going on, world? It's your boy OG Mambo.
And your guy D Money. Join us along with Pint Size Patron and ID Yourself
Here on Fresh Juice at Rainier Avenue Radio.
every Wednesday hump day from 9 to 11 Pacific.
Get exclusive interviews from your favorite artists, all the hottest music, and updates on what we got going on in the world.
That's every Wednesday, 9 to 11 p.m. on Seattle's Rainier Avenue Radio.
1, 2, get down.
What's up, big and little homies? This is Masvita Maraire, host of Seattle Sports Weekly on Rainier Avenue Radio.world, your one-stop shop for Seattle sports. We cover preps, we cover college, we cover pro, we cover it all. Huskies, Mariners, Seahawks, Garfield, South, Roosevelt, Metro, King County. This is where you want to listen to for all the sports that's happening in Seattle. Seattle Sports Weekly on Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Are you in need of new or gently used clothing? Hope's Community Closet is here to help. We offer a wide range of clothing for men, women, youth, children, and infants. Join us on the fourth Saturday of each month from 12:30 to 4 at the Silent Task Force. We're giving clothing with care, community with heart. Lovely Ladies Lemonade for sale, and shop to the sound of old school soul. Any questions? Contact Alicia Kennedy, Executive Director of Women United at 206-316-7601. 206-316-7601. Come and find the perfect outfit for you and your family. We look forward to seeing you there.
Rainier Avenue Radio. Seattle's best music, talk, and sports station.
Rally that I'd never heard of, that Sylvia, you described as an intentional placement of toxicity in a community. And so I'm just going to ask you again, are you sure that that was intentional to a community? Because that's messed up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure about that. And if I disappear, I'll just tell you right now that wasn't my choice. I know we're in a tough political moment here in the United States. Things are happening to people. So yeah, I'll stand 10 toes on that proclamation that choice was intentional. And I'll also say if I come up missing, just know that it wasn't because I chose that.
Well, the thing is, we're going to get deeper into this conversation. We're going to talk about the impacts right here in South Seattle, as well. For each of you, if you can you share some examples locally or nationally of environmental injustice that has directly impacted communities of color? And so, obviously, I'm thinking here in this area, but anywhere as well would be great information for us to have. Sarah, this may not be in your wheelhouse with the work that you do, but I'm going to ask you anyways, because you are a person in this community like all of us are. And there are people out there who are not academics or not professionals, but they're being impacted. And they would certainly voice their opinion. And so I'm going to start this off with you. If you could share some examples, and maybe it's just the placement of trees, maybe that you know about. I know you work at the UW. As locally, nationally, where environmental injustice has directly impacted communities of color.
Yeah.
Or maybe it hasn't.
I think it definitely has. I think some things we talked about already is the changing the flight path of the planes, affecting the air quality, the Duwamish River. I'm sure that the planting of trees was not a focus for lower income neighborhoods. I think they're trying to turn that around now, but definitely areas without trees.
Why is that important? Why is that?
Yeah, so many reasons. So the trees, they don't just benefit in, they create shade, they make things more aesthetic for sure, but there's all these other benefits: the air quality, the water quality. They help retain water, so reduces flooding. Yeah, even in a parking lot, if you have more trees in a parking lot, the gas doesn't evaporate from your gas tank as quickly. So I think the regulations now are you have to have a certain number of trees in your parking lot. People driving on tree-lined streets drive slower. They have studies that show crime rates go down. Just all types of benefits for the trees.
Yeah. From trees.
Yeah, they're the biggest bang for your buck when it comes to helping communities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I did actually have something about, you're talking about the intentional poisoning of a community, and you mentioned that it's not just they're less valued or less important in some people's eyes, is that less vocal. So there's so many instances where people with the resources can have their voice heard. And it made me think of the Love Canal, which was the huge, it was going to be a canal that failed, and then they just filled it with, back in the 60s, I think, they filled it with toxic waste. And if you watch the YouTube video, there's a whole movie about it, but you watch the YouTube video, the very first scene is a community center full of white people shouting after it took them a while to figure out what was happening, but people were getting cancer, a lot of birth defects from the toxic waste was oozing out of the ground and affecting people. And as soon as they figured out, they started talking about it. And I think the government came in and bought all the land so they could move and start over. So I just imagine how that would be different if that was a Black community back in the 60s or even now.
Jonathan, same question for you. Do you have examples? And if you don't, that's fine, locally or nationally, where environmental justice has directly impacted communities of color.
Yeah, I want to bring us to a different thought about what environmental justice is. So far, what we've talked about is how the injustices that low-income communities of color have experienced are related to pollution. And future thinking, something that Sylvia was mentioning earlier, future thinking about how are we going to build our society in the future? So in Washington State, a few years back, Washington State made a commitment to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, the compounds that we put in the atmosphere that is creating climate change. We as a state had committed, or the state legislature and the governor had committed to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. So they're essentially net zero by 2050. And in order to do it, it requires two parts. It requires that we reduce our own individual greenhouse gas consumption, or production rather, but also in order to do that, we need to transform how we get our energy. So the bright lights that are heating me up right now, and the cameras that are able to transmit my image to where you are, is using electricity from somewhere. Most likely that energy is coming from hydropower, from dams. But there are other parts of the state where they're being the energy is coming from fossil gas. So what is often commonly understood as natural gas, but is really just fracked gas. That is not sustainable. That produces greenhouse gas emissions and also ruins the environment. So how do we transition to a low carbon economy? We need to create more clean energy sources like wind and solar to start. There could be some nuclear and there can be some fusion too, but wind and solar. Wind is the cheapest green energy we could possibly produce. Solar is up there too, as a close second. The council that I serve on, the co-chair, Chairman Jared Michael Erickson, he is the chairman of the Yakima Nation. Sorry, forgive me, Chairman Erickson. That was a misspeak. Deep apologies. He's the chairman of the Colville Nation. And he had said that the sunniest and the windiest land is tribal lands. So when we develop energy on their land so that we can benefit, is that environmental justice, that we don't have to lose our lands to windmills or to solar panels, but they do? For who to benefit? There is an inherent tension between who receives the consequences and the needs that we all need. I've heard time and time again, tribes are in favor of clean energy. They understand that they are the most vulnerable populations when it comes to climate change. I've visited tribes where they are having to literally relocate all of their buildings upland because their land is being washed away by rising sea levels due to climate change. So they're not opposed to clean energy development. However, they just want it to be done responsibly, because when it's done irresponsibly, we have that in our state's history. The energy that we are benefiting from right now comes from dams that have destroyed tribal nations, have destroyed their food sources. I've heard stories where you would go to rivers and you could essentially walk across the river because there's so many salmon in that riverbed that you could just walk on the backs of salmon. I've never seen anything like that.
Wait. What did you just say?
I've never seen anything like that.
But you can do what?
You could walk across the river on the backs of salmon because there's so many of them in the water. That sounds like an impossibility, but those were the stories I've heard tribes tell me. And that was before the Columbia River dams were constructed that really decimated those salmon populations. And so we have a duty as a state, as citizens, as partners with tribes, to make sure that we don't make those same mistakes, that when we develop our energy sources, we do it in a way that keeps their interests in mind, which means that they have to have a voice in these conversations and that people actually listen to their voices. You could just talk and talk and talk, but if no one does anything, then that's not environmental justice. But if you talk and you understand what they're saying and then you do something in response to what they're saying, that is environmental justice.
So you said Columbia River?
The Columbia River in Washington
You
State,
can walk across the river.
I don't know if you could, they're different. They're very large,
some
wide
areas.
parts. Yeah. But in some areas, you could walk across the river on the backs of salmon because there were just so many. It was like there was no difference between the land and the water because the fish created the land, the bridge between.
And see, I'm not disbelieving you. I'm just making sure that for everybody out there that we address this, because I don't want, this is not a propaganda show, where we're just trying to, what you're telling me is a real thing.
Those are the stories that I've heard from tribes, and I definitely believe that. Yes. I definitely believe that because I can see the damage that those dams have done. I mean, if you just imagine in your neighborhood, like everything is blocked off. You cannot walk to your school. You cannot walk to your work. You cannot walk to your hospital. You cannot walk anywhere. You're just walled off. Your entire community. Everything would change. You wouldn't recognize it anymore. That's what we did to the salmon. That's what we did to tribes in this state.
Sylvia, same question. Do you have examples locally, nationally, where environmental injustice has directly impacted communities of color?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not expecting you to be an expert on this, but obviously we live in Southeast Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there are some instances that you can speak to specifically in regards to this community,
Yeah.
I won't be mad at you.
Okay. Yeah, I love Southeast Seattle. This is a good zip code.
And that's up to everyone listening all around in different places. Hit us up on whatever format you're listening to, and we'll try and address your issues as well. But yeah, this, is kind of specifically for Puget Sound and the state of Washington. But it is, again, awesome that folks care from everywhere. But anyway, so yeah, give us some South Seattle love.
I have some thoughts about South Seattle. I have some thoughts about the salmon as well. I'll start quickly with a little bit about salmon and then take it home. And so I was listening to you, Jonathan, talk about the salmon. One thing that has happened recently that is actually an environmental justice piece of history is that there's been the largest dam removal in United States history in the Klamath Dam, which the Klamath Dam arguably is or is not the Pacific Northwest still. But the Klamath tribal leaders worked with U.S. government officials and a bunch of other people. And this is on the border between Southern Oregon and Northern California. And these are also people who consider themselves salmon peoples. And this dam removal just happened like at the end of 2024. We're in 2025 now, right? Yeah, so it's just been reopened. These waterways have just been reopened. And it's like the salmon have returned. They have not forgotten their original pathways. And it made me think a little bit about when we had the mandates to stay home when COVID first hit in 2020, and how there were a lot of animals that came out and started to use the pathways again in the urban spaces when all the humans had stopped taking up so much space. And this is not me saying that COVID has been a good thing or has been a good environmental impact, but it is an interesting case study on what happens when you remove barriers to access for living beings in order for them to go out and participate in the ecosystems. And one way that I see this hitting home right here in Southeast Seattle in the 98118, well, when I was a little kid, this was the most diverse zip code in the entire United States. Not in Washington, not in the Pacific Northwest, in the entire United States. So I also grew up hearing multiple different languages on my block. I thought that multiculturalism and diversity were just normal and parts of life. And many of us have been pushed out of this neighborhood due to gentrification and economic injustice and undermining. And one of the things that I've noticed that's different about this area now is the grocery stores. There was no PCC in the 98118 when I was growing up. We had Red Apple. And then there were also areas of the 98118 that just didn't really have a walkable grocery store also. And I see now that there are different kinds of people living here. There are also more sidewalks. There's more just walkableness in general in these neighborhoods. Now people want to crack down and investigate on crime in this neighborhood. And I mean, I think also I talked about the flight paths earlier too, and how they were mitigated over Beacon Hill. My mom had asthma. And so there's all of these different health impacts that have happened in this area of the 98118 that are environmental justice. And now that the demographics of this neighborhood are changing over the last 5-10 years, now folks want to come and invest in the 98118 with creating more walkable access to food, creating more of these systems and pathways, just like the salmon have had the systems and pathways returned to them. Just like, other animals had their systems and pathways returned when humans were taking up less space during lockdown eras. Now people want to create systems and pathways so that we can have more of an ecosystem here in the 98118. And I wonder, there are areas that the people who originally lived here have been pushed to. You mentioned Skyway earlier. Skyway also has very few sidewalks. I think the only grocery store in Skyway there's one grocery outlet there. There are very few walkable grocery stores in that neighborhood. I think about some of the other neighborhoods south of here that some of the folks that were originally in 98118 used to live that have been pushed down to. Again, much less walkable, fewer trees, so the air is not as clean. So, it's not just the salmon that deserve the rights to their land, to their systems and pathways. It's also us right here, the people from the 98118. We deserve our pathways and our systems and our ability to access food, access clean air.
We are, this is the longest panel intentionally, and we're almost out of time. So we're going to take one more commercial break. When we come back, we're going to have maybe 15 minutes. But I appreciate the fact that you have not had the opportunity to just talk in sound bites. And that was the intention of creating a longer panel here so that everyone could express themselves. I do have just so many more questions I'd like to ask all, and I'm sure that our audience would like to hear more. So when we get back from break, I probably want to try and squeeze in a few more questions. But at the same time, I don't want to make you talk in sound bites because this is a big issue. So we're going to go to commercial break. We'll be back to wrap up this discussion, and I got to give you room for final words too. So we're going to try and smash through a few more questions when we get back. It's me, Tony B. I am your facilitator for this particular panel discussion. What is environmental justice? Presented by Rainier Avenue Radio and proudly partnering with King County Parks. We're excited to be able to bring this to you all week long. My guests joining me right now, Sylvia Hadnot, Jonathan Chen, and Sarah Shores. We'll be back to finish up this particular conversation with you right after this.
I'm Paul Pearson, host of Star Time, and this is my real voice. Honest. You're hearing it on Rainier Avenue Radio .world.
Should have told her you were sorry. Celebrate Earth Day with Rainier Avenue Radio Tuesday, April 22nd. Wait. Earth deserves more than that. Seattle and surrounding communities, get ready because it's about to go down for Earth. Tune into the morning live on Rainier Avenue Radio 10 a.m. to 10:30, April 21st through 20th. You know what? Lavera's going to be here with us. We're teaming up with King County Parks to let you know how climate and environmental justice impact you. Earth deserves more than a day. Join us live for free at the historic Columbia City Theater all week long, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, we're going to have panel discussion, workshop, interviews. There'll be an Art of Soul gallery where Seattle-based artists will share their interpretation of climate and environmental justice. Thursday night is Youth Night. Next gen stepping up. An Earth Week gift shop with sustainable swag you can feel good about. Don't sleep on the panel, workshop, and all the action. Visit Rainier Avenue Radio.world right now for the full scoop. Let's show the Earth some real love all week long, celebrating Earth Week in partnership with King County Parks.
Hello, listener. What's important to you about what's going on in your community? Are you interested? Are you concerned? In any case, I invite you to tune into my show, Seattle Here and Now, on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Why? I will be covering a wide range of topics important to you and impacting the community. Each show will have a special guest or guests to share with you information on a variety of subjects that are happening here and now in Seattle. I promise I will work hard to make my show informative, interesting, and entertaining. Be sure to listen to Seattle Here and Now on Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Do you want to reach out to the Vietnamese community in Seattle? Just advertise in Người Việt Tây Bắc, that is Northwest Vietnamese News, the longest running Vietnamese language newspaper in our region. Go to nvnorthwest.com.
Mga kaibigan, ito po si Kuya Bert Kawili.
And this is Miles Salvador from Australia.
And I'm Norb Kawili, also known as Norbcam.
Kung gusto niyo po ang latest news and events from the Philippines at yung local Filipino community, Phil-Am Radio po.
We play Filipino music and interview guests from all around the world.
And I'll keep you updated on the latest Seahawks and sports news.
Kaya always tune in, Phil-Am Radio, every Tuesday, 1 to 2:30 p.m. Pacific Time on Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
And in YouTube and Facebook. Salamat po.
Sing with us as we fill the historic Columbia City Theater with our voices. Join Crowdsource Choir on May 23rd for a soulful, participatory night of singing. Come raise the collective vibration with us at the Columbia City Theater. Tickets at crowdsourcechoir.com.
You are listening to Rainier Avenue Radio,
your community radio station.
Welcome back to Rainier Avenue Radio.world, proudly in partnership with King County Parks, producing Earth Deserves More Than a Week. Anyway, Earth deserves more than deserves more than a week too. Earth deserves more than a day. Our panel discussion here is what is environmental justice. One of our panelists, Professor Charles Jeffrey, got down here as fast as he could, and I want to make sure and give him some airtime. I brought you here because I thought that your voice and your leadership were going to be important to this conversation. So if you want to grab that microphone first, start off by telling us who you are, what you do.
My name is Charles Jeffries. I teach psychology at Seattle Central College.
Okay, and then put that right up here. So put that. Yeah, there we go.
Want to say it again?
Yeah, say it again. Why
Okay,
not?
I'm Charles
Yeah,
Jeffries. I teach psychology at Seattle Central College.
Okay, for you, what is environmental justice? I know that's a big statement, but you take it where you want it to go.
Okay, well, first I want to talk about Alexandria Cortez talked about AOC. She talked about zip code playing a major role in how far you go in life. Okay, let's talk about that with basically standard living level education. Okay, and so environmental justice would mean where everybody gets zip code gets the same quality education, same quality health care, same quality water, You know what I'm saying? You look at Flint, Michigan compared to other communities in Michigan. Flint, Michigan has bad water, and the bad water turns into health problems and also environmental hazards. And so to me, environmental justice would mean everybody having access to quality health care, quality drinking water, particularly drinkable water, and also quality healthcare services.
Okay, I'm gonna let you expand on that a little bit more, but by answering another question that these other folks have already addressed. Do you think it's important to center environmental justice in race, equity? Is that important?
Absolutely, absolutely. Simply because
and youth, and Sylvia said youth as well.
Okay.
But yeah.
I mean, absolutely, because look who gets the best
And class.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Class. Look who gets the best water. I mean.
I don't know
water.
who gets the best
okay,
water.
I'm talking about Flint, Michigan. Okay, which is majority predominantly black. Okay, you got other communities that where you get predominantly white. The quality of the water is different. Okay, in terms of toxins in the water. Or even West Virginia income. West Virginia people are dirt poor in West Virginia compared to in terms of Columbus, Ohio. Okay, West Virginia you have mostly whites, but the real super poor individuals, and the water smells like licorice. You're not supposed to drink it, and now they're finding out birth defects associated with the bad water. The same thing in Flint, Michigan. I mean, if there's other communities outside of Detroit, wealthy communities where they have their good water. Okay, or even the Hamptons, let's say, compared to Flint, Michigan. I mean, the Hamptons, they have clean water. Okay, they have quality healthcare, they have environmentally issues of it. The cars, the exhaust. Okay, so it goes all the way. You know, not just from the water, but the quality of the air. Okay, and even the quality of the soil. Okay, and when you talk about race, where do we usually get the land? Or even let's put Native Americans in this. They took the reservations and put them in the worst land possible where they couldn't grow anything. Whereas the Navajo reservation, we're talking about uranium, okay, downstream from the uranium mine. So these children who are playing in these streams are getting major damage due to the uranium water. So the quality of water, and they're drinking water with uranium tainted in it. And so and income does make a difference, because wealthy incomes, they're going to buy land where they feel the water is safe. Okay. Whereas if you're poor, you just buy wherever you can and live wherever you can go that. And also education ties into that, because people are educated, are going to study and do their research and find out where the better water is. And that's where we're going to buy their land. And then also limitations on what you can buy based on what you look like. Okay, certainly you get finance loans, live in this neighborhood, but I can't get a loan in that neighborhood. Okay, and that's where the race kind of comes into it. So all of it kind of goes together.
Yeah. See, I just wish you had an opinion, you know?
Oh, that is my opinion is that it's wrong. It's basically wrong.
You know, I'm messing with you, man. It is great to have you here again. I thought your voice would be important to have as part of this conversation. And we're dwindling down on time. So I want to give everybody an opportunity to address some things, a couple more questions if I can. I'm going to ask everybody to maybe be a little bit more brief, just so that we can get a couple more questions in here. I'm going to start with you, Professor Jeffrey. What does environmental justice look like in action? We've been talking about it. What does it look like in action?
Everybody has good quality drinking water. Everybody has clean air they can live in. Everybody's respected for their land they go in. Everybody has access to these ideal resources, rather than we have this over here and what nobody else wants, and unbreathable air and polluted water. And over here they have the best water, the best educational system, the best cleanest air, best health care over here. That's why I say everybody should have access to the quality air and the quality of drinkable water and the quality of education. And also stress is also an environmental hazard. Okay, and then all that other lack of income ties into stress.
Sarah, same question from your perspective. What does environmental justice look like in action?
I would say policy that helps direct all the environmental laws to take into account everything, take into account socioeconomic, race, everything that can make make the environment equal for everyone.
Jonathan, same question. What does, you know the question.
When the institutions and the people that hold the power are held accountable by the people that are most impacted by the environmental harms.
Short, sweet, huh? Okay.
You said
Sylvia, same question to you. What does environmental justice look like in action?
Yes, justice is not just a retroactive process. It's a visionary one. So we don't just need to repair the past, we also need to design the future. And that's what future building is all about, like creating systems that are nourishing for our ecosystems and our inner systems. So our nervous systems, our relational systems, and our cultural systems too.
Okay, I'm going to start this question with you and we'll work backwards now that we've talked about what it looks like in action. How can youth and community members get involved in advocacy and policy change? Because policy just came up as well. So folks are out there listening right now, and if this is a call to action, maybe it's just an awareness discussion, but how can youth and community members get involved in advocacy and policy change?
Yeah, there are a number of different ways, and I think one of my favorite ways is simply to go outside. And a lot of us got turned off from going outside over the last few years and what's been going on. But if you go outside, even if you are someone that needs to mask up all the time when you go outside, that's okay too. Take a moment to just be in relationship with the natural surroundings and also talk to the people on your street. Become friends with your neighbors. That's an environmental justice strategy. Get to know the people around you so that when something happens nearby you, you know that you can talk to the people near you and you can build a coalition that can support you in responding.
Jonathan, same question. How can youth and community members get involved in advocacy and policy change from your perspective, where you sit, or the work that you do professionally?
I think people have become really jaded about our political system, and I have too. But I
see you too, Jonathan. If you just had an opinion, no, I'm messing with you. I appreciate you speaking truth to your power.
We live in a democratic society, and the only way in this society that we have power as people is through our vote. But that vote can only go so far, and oftentimes we don't. There's so many different elements of the political process beyond just the vote. And what I ask people to do is just become curious, because I think people think that the politics and policy is just too abstract or not their thing, but it impacts every facet of their life. And if they just become curious about what the system is like, and they understand that they actually have power in this system, especially if their power is amplified by collective voices that also express the same kind of interests as them, then our system will move. Right now, the reason why I feel, just speaking from my own experience, that I'm particularly jaded is because I feel like the power is individual citizen power is being overstepped, overshadowed by monetary power, by capitalism, by the power of money. And in order for us to change these systems, to take back power from the institutions and the people that hold it, we have to learn the power that we have ourselves. And to do that, we just have to understand what the political process is more about and how to be involved in that political process.
Thank you. And Sarah, same question to you. How can youth community members get involved in advocacy and policy change who don't have degrees as an arborist? Or maybe that's what you need to do. I don't know.
I think probably one of the best ways is just educate yourself. And one of the easiest ways to do that, and very inexpensive ways, to just reach out to people, talk to people who are not carbon copies of yourself, and see what the issues are in different communities.
Oh, that could be scary.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, that people don't like to associate with people who they not like us.
Right. Yeah, and it's always a learning experience, and usually a good learning experience. So yeah, I would say do that and get involved where you can.
Thank you. And Professor Jeffries, you heard the question, what can youth and community members do to get involved in advocacy and policy change?
Vote, educate people around you, and encourage, vote, educate people around you, and encourage other people to vote. Okay, that's why the killings in the South, these red states, are gerrymandered because they know the value of voting, and they gerrymander us to keep us from voting. Okay, and that's where you got to vote and educate and get more people out there to vote. That's the bottom line.
All right, wow. We're going to end up being a little bit over time. I wanted to try to get a few more questions in there, but I want to certainly give each of you an opportunity for final words here. Again, you've been listening to our What is Environmental Justice panel. And you've heard a lot from our guests, and they brought their opinions with them, which is what we wanted to have on this particular show, whether you agree or disagree. It is what it is. It begins the discussion. And like Sarah just said, maybe you should talk to some people who, what did you call it? Not carbon copies of yourself, but people who are maybe completely different on their perspective. And I know, Jonathan, you mentioned, well, in some areas, this drive to create a more environmentally just society impacts other communities. So how does that work? You know what I'm saying? I mean, this is just a big issue that we're trying to tackle here, and I appreciate all of you and the time you have here. I want to give each of you a time for final comments. And Professor Jeffrey, thank you for showing up. I know you had to rush to get down here. I thought it was important to have your voice and leadership in this discussion. Whatever you'd like to say right now to our audience listening in Seattle, surrounding communities, Puget Sound, state of Washington, and literally nationally and internationally as well.
Education, standard of living. The higher one's level of education is, the higher your standard of living is, the more education you have, the more you understand these toxins and hazards that operating on you. And that's one of the problems that happened this last election. A lot of folks, they voted out of antipathy for us, and they end up hurting themselves. Okay, and that's where the interconnectivity needs to come in, the education. The bottom line is,
I'm gonna ask you to say that again.
Okay, which one?
Because you brought up something about voting and people and their choices, and I just want to make sure that you said what I thought you said, because that's a political hot button.
Oh, you're talking about where they vote against their best interest because of antipathy towards people of color. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, that's what you meant to say.
Yeah, I mean, that hurt the farmers. You look at the farmers now; they're getting ready to go out of business because they thought it was going to affect Black people and Mexicans. Okay, it hurt people from West Virginia because they thought that it was just going to hurt other people, and now you got West Virginia people laying off. So they voted thinking that they were going to hurt people, particularly Latinos and Africans, and they hurt themselves. It's going to hurt them more, and it's going to help hurt us.
Okay, go ahead, finish your personal final words here. I'm sorry.
That's where the education comes in. Okay, being an educate and read as much as you can and make those connections with other people.
Sarah, final thoughts, whatever you'd like to say.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. I've learned a lot from you guys. Are all very educated in the environment, and I think, vote for environmental justice, voting for those laws that protect everybody. I think that's the most important thing we can do, and got to get the activism out there and get the education out there for everybody.
Jonathan, thanks for being here, man. And whatever you want to say, any final words that you'd like to share with our audience.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the invitation to speak. Thanks for being part of this panel. I echo what Sarah was saying. It's really great to be part of a group of people who have really, really great thoughts on this topic. I really liked what you said at the very beginning, how Earth Day is not a celebration that is limited to just one day or just 1 week. It's every single day of the year, because our Earth, our planet, our home takes care of us. It doesn't stop taking care of us. It doesn't stop being our home. And we shouldn't stop celebrating our home just for a day. We should do it all the time. I think I feel like I come from a great deal of privilege, that I had parents who loved me and a house that I grew up in. I had education. I went to college. And when I go and enjoy the air that I breathe or the water that I drink, I try to take a step back and just acknowledge my privilege and acknowledge that not everyone can drink this water that I drink. Not everyone can breathe the air that I breathe. And I question, why is that so? And what can I do so that everyone can enjoy that air and that water? That there's an injustice when only some people can do that. That should be a human right. And something needs to change. So I ask you all to just think about that on a daily basis. Why is it that you can do certain things? And why is it that other people can't? And what you can do to make that change.
Thank you. Thank you. And Sylvia, again, final words, whatever you want to say, however you want to say it, whoever you want to say it to.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I will build a little bit on what Jonathan just shared, that the word eco actually has a Greek root, and it comes from the Greek root that means home or house. The word economy comes from a Greek word that means to manage one's home. Ecology is the love of our home, the study of our home. So this earth is really our one and only home. There are some people right now who are flirting with going outside into space. A scientist will tell you there is no other planet that is inhabitable by life the way that planet Earth is habitable by life. This is the one planet in the entire known universe that has gone from primordial goo over millennia to the complexity of life and living systems that we now have the privilege to enjoy.
Well, when you think about it in those terms, man. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Exactly. I mean, this is our one and only home. We are at a critical point in Earth's history. There will be a great big ecosystem, global ecosystem level correction that will not be kind to the species that have contributed so greatly to the destruction. Unless we get ourselves together, we organize, and we decide to contribute in a different way. So one thing I would implore those of you that are listening to do is to invest in the youth in your lives, invest in their education, invest in their joy, invest in their happiness, invest in their mental health. Because young people are the ones with all of the ideas, and they're also the ones that are going to be tasked with being the stewards of our one habitable planet. And their joy, their mental health, their nervous systems matter when it comes to their capacity to contribute in a way that's going to make a positive impact.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank all of you. I mentioned today that we were kicking off Earth Week, but this is something that is, again, bigger than a broadcast. It's something deeper than conversation. This is a week-long summit, again, in partnership with Rainier Avenue Radio and King County Parks, that centers community, culture, and climate justice. And as I said before, the earth doesn't just need our love and attention. And Jonathan, as you said, one day out of the year. It's often, we've heard from this discussion, Black, brown, and low-income folks that are living this reality 365 days a year. All week long, right here from the Columbia City Theater, we'll be hosting live panels, youth night, art installations, the Art of Soul Gallery. We've got a Duwamish River tour tomorrow coming up, and we'll wrap this all up with a volunteer opportunity at Skyway Park on Saturday that puts our purpose into practice. And I want to remind you not to miss our Friday noon panel. We got a bunch of great panels. American Lung Association is coming up next. But don't miss our Friday noon panel with our elected officials, and that'll be Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell, Bremerton Mayor Greg Wheeler, Seattle City Council President Sarah Nelson. We've also invited some folks from Eastern Washington, Vancouver, Washington as well. So whether you are listening from home, the car, your classroom, or your corner store, stay tuned in. We'll be sharing stories, raising awareness, and most importantly, hopefully building action, because this is more than programming. This is a movement. This is for the people, and this is why Earth deserves more than a day. We've got a powerful week coming up for you, and we've got more coming up for you today. Again, I'll be joined by the American Lung Association, and once again, a very special thanks to my guests, Professor Charles Jeffrey, Sarah Shores, Jonathan Chin, and Sylvia Hadnot. On behalf of everyone, and we want you to stay tuned here for about 15 more minutes. We'll have the American Lung Association up here. This is me, your host, Tony B, saying, remember, whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you're probably right.